So tonight we are continuing our talk about God's presence, that God is present. All week we've been posting and we've been reading in our Bible reading plan on the YouVersion Bible app about how God is present. And so tonight we just wanted to share another story from the Old Testament that reminded us about God's presence and that spoke to us about how we can put that into practice in our daily lives, especially during this quarantine that we are still finding ourselves in. So our story tonight is from the book of Genesis, chapters, I think it's like 5 through 8 or 9, Noah. Last week we talked about the story of Joseph towards the end of Genesis, and I'm guessing even more of you already know the story of Noah, right? God decides that he's fed up with the wickedness in the world and he's going to destroy it and basically start over. But Noah is a man who finds favor in the eyes of the Lord. So he tells Noah, I'm going to spare you from my wrath. So you have to build a big boat. He's in the middle of the desert, build a boat. Okay, that's like ridiculous. Okay, whatever. And all these animals, it says that God had these animals come to Noah. Noah didn't have to like go and find 2 ants and 2 antelopes, whatever, and 2 rhinos. They all just like came to him and they holed up in this boat, and they were in the boat for over a year because it says that he let the like floodgates open basically, so water was just like pouring out of the sky for months, and the whole surface of the earth was destroyed. All of the living things that walked on it were completely destroyed, and Noah and his family and all these animals were just holed up in this boat for over a year, waiting for the water to recede enough for them to get off the boat and basically repopulate the earth and start over. And that's a story you're all familiar with. It's probably a little more cute in your memory than it was in reality, because in reality, it's really kind of a scary and dark story. I mean, God is killing every single thing on the earth except for what is in this boat. You know, it's, scary, dark, all of that. But in our kids' books, it's like cute animals and a cute floating boat on the surface of nice blue waves. But a few things stick out to me from that story that we can kind of find something in for this time in our lives. And one of them is just that, very simply, that Noah and his family and all these animals were in a boat for over a year. So we've been holed up in our houses and under this like stay-at-home order and no school and no events for about 2 months now. And how many of you are just going completely bananas? Because I am one of those people. But we at least get to go outside and go on walks and see some people or go to the grocery store. Noah and his family were just like in this boat. Who knows like what they were actually living on and what it smelled like, but they were stuck there for 375 days. Now, Noah was 600 years old at this point, so a year in the life of a 600-year-old might be like, not a big deal, but still, it's a long time that they're in this boat. So really, I just thought, if you are feeling like just cooped up and really bored, just think about Noah and be like, it's okay. Noah was in a boat for a year. I can be in my house for a few months. So that was point number 1. Point number 2 is a little bit more profound than just that, but I just really love the fact that God, even though this story is kind of about how God was so fed up with humanity and that he was sad about what was happening on the face of the earth, it's also about how God showed up and was present in the life of Moses, this guy who had decided, amidst all the sin and wickedness that was going on in the world, he was deciding to follow God. And so God was with Moses. And it's a story about God's grace as much as it is about God's wrath. Because even though everything around Noah was a train wreck and God was starting over, God was present with Noah in that moment. And even though his experience was probably very, very chaotic and very scary, imagine like just the storm alone, how scary that probably was. But we know that God was with Noah every single step of the way. From the inception of God's plan, telling Noah, you're going to have to build this boat because this is my plan, this is what I'm going to do, to even just like telling him, send out this dove to go find foliage. And if you don't, then you're going to have to wait some more. Like he was with Noah through this whole plan. And God's presence can be so comforting for us when we're in the midst of a crisis. And number 3, my third point that I just want to point out is at the end of the story, God makes a promise with Noah and with, all of humanity at that point, Noah and his family, that he was never going to do that again. And he does that with the symbol of a rainbow. And something that I really love that I'd never noticed before when I was reading this story was that God actually says, every time I see a rainbow in the clouds, he talks about like he paints the rainbow in the clouds. We know that it's like God that does it, but every time he sees it, he remembers that promise. He remembers that covenant that he made with Noah. And, when you read that, at first you kind of think like, okay, maybe I see a rainbow once every 2 months or so, it's not really that often. But God, who is present over the face of the whole earth, sees how countless rainbows probably every single day. And so God is constantly reminded of that covenant and the grace that now we get to live in under that covenant. Because even though God is probably grieved with the state of things right now, with our culture, with the sin of humanity, he made a promise to not destroy and wipe us all out ever again. And that's just a really cool reminder for me about God's faithfulness and God's promise, God's presence and grace in our lives every single day. So those are just a few of the things that stuck out to me as I was reading the story of Noah this week. Jess, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, when you were talking about, and I know we don't want to get caught up in the, like, I guess what you might have in your head as a kid of Noah and the Ark. When you think about the size of the Ark, we all know it was huge. But when I was researching this, it talked about it being the length of 1.5 football fields. So to sit there and hear, Noah was commanded by God during a drought, go build this ark. Okay, let's just go build a boat. We're thinking about the little boats in the May River. It wasn't a little boat. It was 1.5 football fields long, and it was a 4-story building tall. So this thing was massive. It could fit 370 railroad train cars in it. That's just massive. And how long it took him to make it and build it. And the whole time people, he's being mocked because they're in a drought. Like, yeah, right. What are you going to do? The other piece of it that kind of takes me back is, you get to take 2 animals of each kind and only your family. So processing that, like, you don't get to pick your best friends, and maybe you don't like your family, or maybe you're not getting along with your family, but he's doing exactly as God commands him to. So Hannah, with that, all of that, why did God choose Noah to do this? Why didn't he pick somebody else?
Yeah, the Bible it says specifically that God was fed up with everybody and he was going to just completely start over with everybody. But then there's this one verse that says, but Noah found favor with God, which just means that Noah was a man that was still walking with God, even though everyone else, so it seems, was not. And so that's why Noah, he just was following God closely. And so God decided to spare him from his plan to start over.
Yeah, and his plan was to flood the earth because he was trying to wipe out sin and sinners. So everybody else did not have favor in his eyes. So that's pretty mind-blowing to me. You had talked about, kind of, I mean, it's perfect timing because it was almost like Noah was quarantined, and we feel sorry for ourselves being quarantined for 2 months. So students, I'd like to know, what's the most trying part of the quarantine for you right now? Just comment below. We're going to keep going, but let us know what's trying for you. Not only to look at this compared to Noah, but we want to pray for you. Our team wants to pray for you because we don't look at this lightly. We're not mocking things that are trying to you. Stuff is real right now. But what is God doing during this time? Because I'd love that for a follow-up. Like, what's been trying to you, but what have you seen God work in you during this time? So while you're doing that, circling back, Hannah, verse 6, Genesis 6:6 This kind of hurts my feelings. So explain this for everybody a little bit more. It said the Lord was sorry he made man. Like, that doesn't make me feel very good about myself. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah.
Don't laugh at
So
me.
I'm not laughing at you. I think it's funny that you said it hurt your feelings because yeah, I could see that for sure. um, now I'm no Old Testament scholar. I'm not really even very good at the Old Testament because it was so long ago that I feel like it's hard sometimes to even understand some of the language in it. But I think this verse, from what I read, is in stark contrast to the creation account where God creates something and he says, it's good, it's good, it's good. And then he creates man and says, it's very good. Well, then all of a sudden, not very long afterwards. I mean, it was hundreds of years, but in the narrative of the Bible, it was a very short time, only just a few chapters later. And it says that God was sorry for what he created. And, not that he felt like he did a bad job because, he had to allow choice into the world for us to not be robotic and for us to actually love God on our own terms, which results in worship and honor and praise. So, he had to let choice be a part of creation, but people chose wrong. And it says, and the version Jesse read says that he was sorry that he created people. Some translations say that he was grieved. That just like it hurt his heart, and he was like, I don't want it to be this way. It's not good for man for it to be this way because they were created to be in relationship with me and following me, and they're not. So he was just going to start over. But that's where that verse, he found favor, that Noah found favor with God, is so cool because God let humankind be spared through Noah and his family, just like he spares humankind through his son much, much later. So when we read the whole narrative of scripture, we know that that's always God's plan to save people through the one.
Yeah.
So cool.
Love it. I love it. Yeah. It's interesting when you read verses like this and then you hear it like that. It's makes sense now. I don't have to feel sorry for myself anymore. So thank you for all of that. Very briefly, we didn't talk about the dove during the story, but can you just touch on that super quickly? And then what does that represent? I mean, like most things in the Bible, there's so much detail in here that sometimes we just skim over, but it's so important. So can you just talk about, for those that don't know this story, about what I'm talking about with the dove, and then what the dove represents with Noah?
Yeah, so the dove was as soon as the water started receding, it says that the boat kind of like came to rest on a mountain top. And so the boat was stationary, but they still had to wait for the water to go down enough for them to like get out and start, repopulating the earth and growing things again, like produce and all of that. So they just had to wait the right amount of time. So they sent this dove out, and as soon as the dove left, it searched around for somewhere to land, like a tree or whatever. And the first time he went out, he did not find anything to land on or grab at all. So he just came straight back to Noah. I don't know what it said, like a week later, maybe 7 days later, he sent it out again. And that time he brought back an olive branch. So it was like, oh, good, we can see trees now. So the water had gone down a little bit. And the third time he sent the dove out, the dove didn't come back at all. And so that was their sign that they could get out of the boat because enough of the water had gone down and it was safe for them to get out. But Jess, what did you find in your reading about what the dove represents? Because you might know a little bit more about that than me.
Probably not, but to me, it was, again, it says it over and over and over again in this story that, everything that God commanded, Noah did. And just the faithfulness that Noah had and his obedience was long-term. It wasn't just a one-time, okay, I'll build this ark and then I'm not going to get on it. Every single thing that God commanded. And to that, with the dove, God is present and God is faithful during this. So he sent the dove out And Noah didn't lose hope during all of that either. And there was, he didn't give up the first time. He didn't throw it back in the cage. Well, probably didn't have a cage, but wherever he threw it in the bottom of the ark, that he continued and he tried again. So he tried until it didn't come back. And then, that was a sign to him that there was land somewhere. So, that was, I'm sure there's lots of different ways to look into that and to study that. But I just, with all of this, the lesson that, God is present, especially during our trying times. And everybody's trying time looks a little different, whether it's, stuck on an ark. And mind you, while they were stuck on that ark, it rained for 40 straight days. So, I can't imagine. We're all going bonkers now what that was like. And I'm sure it stunk. We have chickens, just chickens stink. I can't imagine having two of every animal. But being obedient in the word and your faithfulness to God, he will find favor in you just like he did Noah. So Hannah, do you have anything else to wrap up before we send everybody to their small group Zooms?
I would just say, maybe a little bit apart from the story of Noah, one encouragement I have for you is to just hold on to every single moment and let Jesus dictate how the moment goes.
Yeah.
Don't let what you read on the news, don't let your emotions, your current frustrations, your current annoyances, your even your grievances about what is canceled or what you're missing right now. Don't let those dictate your mood, your emotions. This is what I'm learning right now. So we're learning this together. But let the presence of God, the peace of God wash over you every single moment and every single decision. And that's not easy. It's a discipline for sure. But just let that drive your character instead of the circumstances, the media, or your own emotions. That would be my encouragement to you. And I miss you all very much. Please continue to let us know how we can be praying and how we can help you and your families. And we love y'all. We'll see you later.
Bye, y'all. Love you.